Okay, now we have a challenge for Mike and Jason. We Magnificent Seven or Eight or whatever we're covering. The one we haven't covered is Netflix.
Welcome to Telltales. I'm Mike Nicoletti. Every week, along with my co-hosts Jason Wallace and Hunt Lawrence, we bring you the cash flow memo. Get it at telltales.us. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive deep into energy, technology, and healthcare. So download the memo now and get started.
The following conversation is intended for informational purposes only. You should always do your own work to determine if an investment is suitable for you.
Okay. We promised not to talk politics, and we've been very disciplined. We just have to not talk politics this afternoon. And then before we're together next Wednesday, we will have a new president. So we've been pretty disciplined. To start on Exhibit C, Israel targets did not include any of the oil export facilities. It was just plants that were making missiles and drones. And it was very successful, I guess. And the Iranian response to it was that pretty much accepted that they would not be engaging in another missile barrage on Israel. So things have calmed down there, and the price of oil reflects that. That 4.4 million barrels of extra capacity in 24, declining to 3.5, I think is still okay. But the OPEC ministers are looking at the same numbers, and they plan to feed about 1 million barrels a day into the market at the rate of around 100,000 barrels a day per month, starting December 1. And so the price of oil, if we go to page 2, last Thursday when I put this down, was 67 and 26, 69 and 25, and the near month was 71. Those numbers will all be maybe $3 lower, given what happened over the weekend. So if you have on your watch list your favorite oil company, I would wait some more and see if you can get it for a little less per share in the next couple of months. On gas, pretty much the same situation. There's no question that gas demand will go up. I mean, look at 24 versus 23, 106 Bs a day versus just under 104. And I think the projection for almost 110 next year is pretty solid, because there will be some growth in LNG exports where it was flat. Everyone talks data center needing power, but that doesn't translate apparently into more than about 1.5 Bs a day increased demand for gas. Remember, every month or quarter that goes by, there's more solar, more wind. The problem is those aren't baseload, those are intermittent. But the demand for gas to make power, I don't think is necessarily going to go up by more than that 1.5 Bs a day per year, even with increased power demand and more intermittent power from wind and solar. I mean, to think that somehow power demand is going to take the place of increased LNG, I just think is way optimistic. So then it comes down to what will the supply be? And the production is flat, 24 versus 23, with the lower gas prices. We have 105 and 25 now. Now that should be a good number. But remember, in October of 23, the industry got to 104. And the reason 24 was 102 is there was some curtailments, especially in the Marcellus. So our gas price projection here, 24 will average around 260 and get up to 340 in 25. The strip in 25 last Thursday was 3.25, and then 370 in 26. Those those numbers are a little bit suspect if production suddenly gets to a higher level pretty quickly. The other thing is Canadian imports, which if at the beginning of this period were like 4 Bs a day, are now up to 6 Bs a day. So there's some additional gas coming in from Canada. That's a matter of the Canadian producers being willing to take lower netbacks because the cost to get gas from Canada into the US is significant. And to a certain extent, I think what's going on there is what goes on in the Permian, where it's associated gas with oil. And that associated gas is not going to be curtailed necessarily by low gas prices if oil prices give people incentive to drill. So not much good news on the oil front or the gas front. On the cash flow statement for the U.S. government, not a great deal of good news there. At the Trump rally in Madison Square Garden, which went on for 5 or 6 hours last Sunday afternoon, Elon Musk was one of the speakers, and he spoke about reducing spending at the government by $2 trillion. $2 trillion happens to be just a little more than what the deficit is for 24 and 25. But to try to take more than $500 billion out of spending looks next to impossible if you look at these lines. If you go down the spending for 24, about $1.5 trillion for Social Security, that is not likely to be reduced. The combination of Medicare and Medicaid is another $1.5 trillion. That is not likely to be reduced. Interest is now almost $1 trillion, up from, say, 300 billion several years ago. The debt is there. The interest rate, actually on the 10-year bond, has gone up by about 50 basis points in the last 4 weeks. So that doesn't look like there's much defense spending at around just under 900 billion. Hard to see that there's much give there. And then the all other expenses, which used to run around 800 or 900 billion or $1.4 trillion, certainly some savings could be made there, but not $2 trillion, maybe 300 billion, 400 billion. As a practical matter, whoever wins the election, whoever the new administration is, plus the House and the Senate, are going to have to flatline spending. And that $1.4 trillion went up almost to 3 trillion during COVID, and they just haven't been able to get it back down to under $1 trillion. They're just going to have to work hard on doing that and then hope the economy grows so that the debt to GNP starts to improve rather than getting worse. I always ask Mike or Jason if they have anything to add now, and other than one or both of them say, no, we have the same sentiments. I don't, that's basically the response we get. Having predicted your response, Jason, anything else to add?
I will add something. Kind of related to politics. I think coming into this election cycle, a lot of people were worried about how AI was going to affect it, particularly around deep fakes, creating misleading videos of the candidates, or just generally AI generated misinformation was going to drown out maybe real news stories. And neither of those scenarios played out. So I think that's a bit of good news we can add. I don't know if it was overblown or the tech companies worked really hard to suppress that kind of thing, but it's a good thing for our society and our elections.
Well, there's a few days left here before the election, so maybe we shouldn't call it a win yet.
Right. They're running out of time.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, now we have a challenge for Mike and Jason. Magnificent 7 or 8 or whatever we're covering. The one we haven't covered is Netflix, which is on page 4. And of the companies on page 1 that have reported so far this week, Alphabet or Google came in with very good results. And of course, part of the good results is continued progress at YouTube. And we've added Spotify in here as a company to think about. And I'm getting out here on thin ice, but in introducing this subject, for Mike and Jason to carry on with. Spotify, it seems to me, has pretty much captured a very high share, or what Mike would call network effect, I guess, for music. I mean, I've been doing it anecdotally, but everyone seems to use Spotify rather than Apple Music. And so for the consumer, you have kind of one source. When it comes to streaming, movies, sports, serials, you know, you have to have like 6 or 7 accounts. Is Netflix, just by being bigger and better, liable to become like Spotify? Or is YouTube hidden within Google, where, you know, the Justice Department, the FTC, is going to try to break them up? Is YouTube more likely? And since I've already kind of rehearsed this with Mike in our morning calls, why do we direct that one to Jason?
Yeah, I kind of think, in my opinion, the end state is a duopoly with YouTube and Netflix. One interesting thing out of the Google earnings calls is they highlighted the revenue number. It was a milestone for YouTube. They hit 50 billion last 12 months in a combination of ad sales and subscription. So I wish they broke those numbers out a little more between each, and further by the traditional YouTube that's existed for a long time versus YouTube TV. But 50 billion is larger than Netflix's 37 billion in sales. We have 40 there. Maybe that's more updated, but it's larger than Netflix today. So the way I kind of break them up is Netflix is trying to get into more live content, but I kind of feel Netflix is like more traditionally where HBO used to play. So it's on demand streaming of recorded content, TV series, that kind of thing, movies, and YouTube TV or YouTube in general is kind of more two branches. There's the short form content where advertising much more naturally fits into, and then the live YouTube TV is more live sports, news, traditional cable. And obviously advertising has been a well-known model for that kind of content. So, you know, Netflix is trying to break into it. I think there's room where there's, you know, 2 subscriptions could work together. Definitely not the 6 or 7 that a lot of people have today. So I think those are the 2 winners, and it could be a duopoly going forward. Do you have a different opinion on that, Mike?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I think that if you think about all the different types of content, different forms of content capture value in different ways. So live content, sports, are most valuable live. They're not very valuable after the fact. But Friends, the TV show, is immensely valuable because it gets replayed over and over and over again. And Netflix sort of has the vast majority of their catalog on this reusable content. It's a very enviable position to be in. Clearly, Amazon Prime's kind of trying to do the same thing, but they're realizing that in order to get customers, people to actually use it, they also need to offer something else to hook them in. And that, you know, they've probably done the most from a streaming platform perspective of focusing on live. So I kind of see it as it's a competitive marketplace where Netflix has a very strong scale operating position in that they can buy the content and scale it over a large group of users. From a competitive dynamic perspective, everybody else needs to do something else to get users into the funnel. And generally that just means doing, at this point, it means doing either some sort of specialty content, like an HBO or Showtime where the production value maybe is higher, or doing something live. And I think Google has the broadest approach to all of this. And Amazon Prime is probably leaning most into the live piece. I think Spotify is in an interesting position because if you think about the way they allocate their revenue, there's some like strict percentage share based on minutes listened. So if I understand their billing model right, if they can get anybody to listen to a podcast instead of music, that podcast is probably going to generate, by not going into the pool of money that's paid out to the actual music creators, it potentially brings more money into the pocket at Spotify. So just think about that from the perspective of video as well. If they can get content on their platform that they don't have a marginal cost associated with it, then maybe that's an area they'll compete. I don't think they're going to be a major competitor, though. So, so did I say basically the same thing you said? Just
Maybe I would add that, YouTube has an enviable position too of having free content.
Yeah.
Traditional YouTube, and their I don't remember off the top of my head, but their revenue split is a lot more favorable than Spotify's split with recording artists.
Yeah, but we still don't know how profitable YouTube actually is.
Right.
Right. I mean, everybody's assumption based on the fact that they don't report the figure is that it's probably not profitable. And in that, they're probably spending the money to try to figure out how to continue to grow the product. But nobody really knows.
Jason, remember when we were talking about weaknesses in the franchise, the one you wanted to do first was Alphabet, Google. The third quarter results, which are very strong across the board, give you some confidence that their search franchise will not be overwhelmed by Microsoft or OpenAI or whomever, or what's your view on that now?
Yeah, I think it's too early to call that, but every quarter that we don't see a big impact from AI into the search revenue is a little more confidence inspiring. So for their sake, hopefully it doesn't happen, or they're going to find a way to incorporate that into search into the AI results or search ad revenue into the AI results and not be impacted. Yeah.
Right. Do you think Bing has picked up any business at all or any market share at all?
That's a good question. We saw an uplift when ChatGPT first came out, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's gone away. Have you seen numbers, Mike?
No, but you're not going to disrupt Google search by doing a different search company. That's just,
yeah, I agree.
That's not the right way to do it. The way to do it is to come up with a wholly new, better way to get the information to people that they want to see. So I think the most likely source of potential disruption from Google, and this is evidenced by Google's own actions, is that somebody will come up with a ChatGPT-like products like Perplexity or even the ChatGPT search, which they offer now in beta. That it's kind of like I was telling Jason this the other day. Google has this button where you can just type in your search prompt and press the "I'm feeling lucky" button, and it'll just take you right to the answer.
Does that button still exist?
Yeah, that's a good question. It might not exist anymore. It tells you where I am on the search customer spectrum, but. Currently today, using ChatGPT or one of these other models is sort of like the "I'm feeling lucky" button. Just give me the answer now. The reality is when there's lots of margin in a product like Google Search, the opportunity to release a competitive product, maybe at a lower margin, is there. So, I think it was Bezos that always said, "Your margin is my opportunity." So there's no question there's more competition there. And we can see that Google has plenty of chops when it comes to AI because they've basically waited till they knew their competitors were doing something in order to release something that they've already built at some stage, or maybe are just catching up to build. But they're right there with this whole problem, or with this whole AI thing. but understanding that it's probably going to be harder for them to sustain their Google search product over the longer run.
Speaking of franchise, is Meta kind of giving away their product and to a certain extent Google too? Is that going to cut into the amount of co-pilots that Microsoft gets paid for?
I mean, it's certainly cutting into OpenAI's potential business if Meta's going to give away the product that OpenAI wants to charge for. I don't believe Microsoft is, sole sourcing their AI from OpenAI. So, it might be an opportunity for Microsoft to generate a higher margin Copilot.
Oh yeah, you'll definitely be able to use Llama inside Azure Cloud for sure.
Yeah, definitely within Azure, maybe within Office as well. So yeah, if you don't have to pay to license the models, that'd be a big win. The cost of doing the actual inference is dropping dramatically. OpenAI actually gave a stat about how the cost has been reduced. So we talked about Google's margin on search when they were starting to do AI results in the search prompt. Maybe back at that time, 1 million tokens. So this is essentially analogous to words produced, cost $36. And today, producing those million words is 25 cents. So it's been reduced by more than a factor of 100. So now maybe at the point that licensing the model is the bigger expense, and paying for the electricity and stuff is less expensive. I don't know if we're at that point, and I don't know how much OpenAI would charge, but the expenses are shifting, the cost calculus.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a quick break for a message from Oak Cliff Sailing.
Dawn Riley with Oak Cliff here again, and we've had a lot of October surprises. First of all, we're getting all the boats out of the water, the Match 40s. Almost all the rigs are down, a couple of boats are out, and we have a great team of volunteers here and staff members checking all of the sail to make sure that they're ready to go in the springtime. We're already thinking about that. We have a new team member, Harry, who is joining us on the shore side. And then we also have our high-performance high school sailor who's down sailing on a NACRA 15 that was donated by Hannah Sweat. So we're going to go down to the beach and see how he's doing. And over the weekend, we had an amazing weekend of racing in the Halloween Invitational. Peter Wickwire and the Canadians filled out the podium. And now we got to figure out how to get more match races in here. We have a World Match Racing Tour Academy next summer, and that will all be posted on our website shortly. Our brochures are going out, and I'm going to leave you with a really cool video of some amazing racing and 30 knots of wind. Probably the biggest surprise was no damage. Love that. We're going to have an excellent end of the month of October with Halloween tomorrow, 75, 80 degrees, and I will see you next Wednesday.
And now back to the show.
More next week on this. Last week we did no healthcare, so we have 5 minutes left for Lantheus, Vertex Pharmaceutical, Harrow, Lilly. Obviously, Lilly disappointed their followers today, but Jason, what do you see that's noteworthy in recent news on those 4 healthcare companies?
Yeah, the big news was Lilly. Their sales of tirzepatide, so their GLP-1 drug, missed by about $600 million in the quarter. So very large numbers. It did $3.1 billion. And I think you can easily attribute that miss 100% to the compounding pharmacies taking away their business. So obviously that's why Lilly and Novo are going after the compounders so hard. The FDA in the last couple of weeks has taken those drugs off the drug shortage list. So in theory, the compounding pharmacies should no longer be allowed to to produce them. It's much more of a gray area. There's a collective of compounding pharmacies that are obviously fighting against that because now they're making billions of dollars that in revenue that they didn't have the opportunity to make last year. And so far, they've brought a suit against the FDA itself for pulling that drug off the shortage list, and the FDA's listened to them, and they've let them continue to make the drugs while they reevaluate their decision. But I think Lilly's results that came out yesterday kind of highlight the fact that, hey, we expected to make this much drug and sell it, and we didn't. So the shortage, in fact, probably is over. It'll be interesting to see where this goes from here. I think there's going to be a lot of lawyers involved, and that's an easy prediction, I guess, right? And, you know, I don't see the FDA changing their decision. But one thing we are going to see out of this is Lilly's going direct to the patients, direct to the consumer, even without new approvals of more competitive drugs. There already is pricing pressure from these compounding pharmacies. They were selling the drug at a fifth of the price. So if you are looking to get the drug, you can get it maybe from Lilly directly, more affordably, and it'll be more accessible. How much time? I've got a couple minutes. Vertex news. Vertex, they presented their some final data out of the phase 3 studies for their pain drug. Some interesting things came out of that. A lot of it was kind of as expected, but they gave some numbers around the size of the market. There's 80 million acute pain patients in the U.S. each year. About half of them, 40 million patients, receive an opioid. And they see 85,000 of them developing opioid addiction within the first year of being prescribed the opioid. And they estimate that burden on the U.S. is $180 billion annually. So if the U.S. can save that money by having a new drug introduced that kind of reduces opioid addiction, that would be fantastic. They also ran a survey with a lot of physicians that are prescribers of opioids and just different pain treatments, and they were seeing that a lot of them were being very receptive to wanting something else to prescribe. So I think the government wants an alternative to opioids. A lot of the prescribers want an alternative, and a lot of patients don't like taking them. Obviously, if there's 80 million people eligible and only half of them take the opioid prescription, there's a lot of appetite for something better than acetaminophen, and not addictive like opioids. So that kind of anecdotal stuff, fuzzy things, like make me feel the FDA is highly likely to approve this. I know that's not quantifiable, but there's definitely a big gap in the market there.
Anyone working on competitive products, Jason?
There's a handful, and they're pretty early stage. The one thing Vertex is doing is they're doing the same model. They're running the same model they have for CF. And what that means is they're already working on the next 2 versions of this drug. One of them's already in human trials. The next one, I believe, is entering phase 1, or it might have even started phase 1 by now, but they're going to keep innovating, and they're going to make it very expensive and very difficult for competitors to come into the market.
Anything else in healthcare generally, Mike or Jason, that's significant? We have the antitrust people after Jason's bête noire, the middleman.
Oh, the PBMs, yeah.
Yeah, so CVS has been floating the idea of breaking themselves up. They would definitely split their insurance division from the CVS stores. It's still a question of where the PBM falls. They're still going to be partnered with one side of the business that still makes it a little questionable. But the PBM is where all the growth in CVS is coming from. So that's the business that either side would want to take.
Yeah. And United Health is just an incredible financial record over the last couple of decades, but they've definitely flattened out and showing some weakness because some significant part of United Health is PBM.
Right. And a number of insurers that were over-indexed to Medicare and Medicaid expansion during the pandemic years, a lot of the incentives there were unwinding. So a number of insurers took a hit this quarter from not the healthier patients on Medicare and Medicaid were no longer on their roster.
Right. Good. Well, I think we've covered the waterfront, and we'll be back 7 days from now with a new administration, hopefully. And with that, everyone be well and stay healthy, and we'll talk 7 days from now. Take care.
The views expressed on this podcast are the hosts alone and do not constitute an offer to sell or a recommendation to purchase or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security nor a recommendation for any investment product or service. While certain information contained herein has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, neither the hosts nor any of their employers or their affiliates have independently verified this information, and its accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Accordingly, no representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made as to, and no reliance should be placed on, the fairness, accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of this information. The hosts and all employers and their affiliated persons assume no liability for this information and no obligation to update the information or analysis contained herein in the future, and may or may not hold positions in the securities mentioned.